Hello and welcome to From Impossible to Inevitable. I am your host, Megan Bauer. Thank you so much for joining me today and pushing play on today's episode. So, this is episode 198, and I am so excited about how far we've come on this podcast journey together. I am absolutely delighted. I am so glad you are here. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for being here for 198 episodes or however many you've tuned into. I also think it's delightful that there's all of this backlog for you. If you've just recently started listening, there's all of this that's there for you at any time because that's how it works. And that's great. Um, but today, as I was considering, okay, what is out there for me to share? What needs to be said? What do we got? If you're fairly new to the podcast, this is kind of how I roll, especially with the podcast. I just kind of say, universe, what do I need to say? I am available for guidance. That's how I roll. So, as I was considering this, a question came to me yesterday, and this was a question for me. It was a question that came into my mind for me specifically. And the more I have kind of simmered on it, the more I came to feel like this is part of what I have for you today. So the question that came to me yesterday, I was driving home from dropping the girls off at the bus, and I was listening to music and I was just kind of in the zone, just driving. And the question hit me out of nowhere. It was, where are you holding back and why? I was like, well, that's really interesting. Where am I holding back and why? So I got home and I jotted it down real quick and I went about my day, right? I didn't actually pay much attention to it. And partway through my day, the question came to me a little bit more powerfully, and I was in the middle of something, so I wrote it down again. And I was like, okay, yes, I will. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this. And when I said we'll talk about this, I was talking to my journal, like, yeah, you and we will talk about this. We will talk about where I'm holding back and why. And so then this morning, I didn't give it any more thought after that. And then this morning, I was getting ready and I was like, okay, well, what do we have? And this question came to me again. And but it came to me in a little bit of a different spin because instead of feeling like, why am I holding back? The answer there was given to me. The question of where am I holding back still stood. That's still something I need to dig into and explore and really spend some time on. But the and why was answered for me. And the and why was the risk. I was like, well, that's really interesting. The risk. The risk is why I hold back. So I pose this question to you. Whatever it is in your life that you are working towards, working on, building, creating, I mean, this even just counts in just creating a beautiful life and just creating a life that you want. You don't actually have to be, have any creative projects or you don't have to actually be building a podcast or be building a brand or you don't have to be building anything necessarily other than a great life. But where in your life are you holding back? That could be are you holding back with friendships? Are you holding back with, putting yourself out there in a way that you want to, in showing up in the way that you want to, in, being the person that you want to be, in learning a thing that you want to learn, in making your house a way that you want your house to be. And this could be really, honestly, so many places. And I could not even tell you where you're holding back. No one could tell you where you're holding back because it's also such a personal, deeply personal thing. And it's something that only you can gauge. Only you know when you are giving something your all, when you don't have any more to give. Only you know when and where you're holding back and why? And I would guess that there's some form of risk there to why you're holding back. There's some form of risk, and the fear that's attached to the risk would be the reason why you're holding back. And this idea of risk is really interesting to me. And when that answer popped up to me and I stopped and I was like, oh, that is really interesting, because there's risks on both sides, right? So if you want to build something, if you want to create something, you want to put something out in the world, right? There's the risk of it not working out, right? There's the risk of people making fun of you or people being mean or people not supporting you or people just ignoring you, which kind of sucks too. And there's these risks of, looking like a fool or looking like a failure, or, maybe you don't know enough, or maybe blah, blah, whatever. There's all these risks to actually doing the thing, to putting that thing out there in the world, to, possibly showing your ineptitude, to possibly, tripping over yourself. There's all of these risks attached to doing the actual thing. And that is what we focus on. That's what holds us back. That's what keeps us from doing the thing. That's what keeps us from creating the thing. We've got all these risks. What will these people think? All of that nonsense, right? We've got all of that. And that's what we focus on. That is truly where our vision goes. That is what we focus on. We forget that on the other side, there's risks as well. Because it's not a one-sided thing. We think it is. It feels like it is. Our subconscious that freaks out and scares us into staying small and staying the same and not changing. It wants us to think that there's only risks in doing the thing, in changing, in trying something new, and putting yourself out there, when there are still risks on the other side. The risks of not changing, of not doing the thing, of not putting yourself out there, of not trying, of not growing, of just staying the same. And what are those risks? And are we paying attention to them? And are they scarier than trying and maybe failing and maybe somebody on the internet being mean? Which is actually worse? I had a conversation with a friend over the summer. And I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I'm going to say it again because it fits. And my friend was talking about how, afraid of change she is. And of course, we're all afraid of change. Of course, I've talked about that on the podcast a lot too, being afraid of change because it's the unknown. And, she's afraid of change. And I empathized and I was like, yeah, change is scary. But in 5 years from now, do you want to be the same person? Do you want to be in the same place? Not necessarily physical place, but metaphorical place. Do you want to be in the same place? Do you want to be exactly as you are now? Or do you want to be, do you want just now to continue forever? Or do you want things to improve? Do you want things to change? Do you want things to get better? Do you want these aspirations that you have to actually, you actually reach them? What about these achievements? What about, your family and your kids and, how they grow, right? And that brings it into perspective of well, no, I don't want to be in the exact same place metaphorically as I am now in 5 years from now. Of course, I will want to have grown. I will want to have accomplished things. I will have want to have done things. I will have wanted my kids to do things. And I will want them to be, 5 years into their growth journey and, all of this. So essentially, we want the change. We want that because the staying the same is too painful, right? It's always I tease my girls every year. This is the last year that they move on in school. My youngest is in first grade, and she was talking about second grade the other day, and I was like, no, we're not going to do second grade. Okay, we went from pre-K to kinder, and now we're in first grade, but this is where it ends. We're stopping here. We're not going to do second. We're certainly not going to do third. We're just going to stay. And she's like, Mom, whatever. But the truth is, of course I don't want her to stay in first grade forever. What? That's ridiculous. Of course, I want her to continue to grow and to learn and to develop and to become who it is she's meant to be. And that requires some risk. That requires the risk of, yeah, maybe second grade will be really hard. That requires, trying new things. That requires, being in a new class with a new teacher and all of these like new things. And maybe you won't like it as much as you liked it before. And maybe it'll be more uncomfortable. And maybe all of this, right? There's all of these fears, all of the risk attached to the growth. But there's the other side, right? There's the other side. And luckily, we can't just pick a date in time and be like, okay, this is my day. I'm just going to stay in this day forever and I'm never going to do a different day. None of us get that option. We're forced on to the next day. Like, okay, this is a new day and it's yours and you get to do with it what you will. And things are going to be different today because it's a different day. And for most of us, our days are pretty predictable. And we get surprised sometimes or, whatever happens, but we aren't living on the edge most of the time on what our next day is going to look like. We got a pretty good idea about it. So it feels like things don't change when actually they are changing all of the time. There are just these little micro changes that happen over time that we don't even notice. But we feel the risk in making deliberate, intentional changes because we're doing it with our eyes open. We're not just like floating through, going through the motions, going through the day-to-day, dealing what comes to us. We're actually going out and facing something new. Because a lot of the times we're in this reactionary state where we're just, whatever comes to us, then we deal with it. But when we are thinking about creating something, building something, doing something different, living intentionally, whatever it is whatever it is that's freaking you the crap out, that's making you hold back, when we think about doing that, we're no longer in this reactionary state. We are in this active state of going to do the thing. And when we're in this active state of going to do the thing, then we could do it wrong. Then we could be blamed for it. Then people could be mad at us. We've got all this drama around the thing we do. But there's risks on the other side too. The risk of staying the same, the risk of not trying, the risk of not growing, the risk of not developing. And, there's all these studies or whatever that people have done about deathbed regrets. And it's people oftentimes most regret the things that they didn't do. Sometimes they're like, yeah, I did that one thing and I wish I didn't do it. And, I was kind of an idiot, but whatever, I did it. But the things that really hurt are the things we held back on doing. The things that really hurt is when we held back on a relationship or we held back on a career path or we held back on a project or our life's calling or whatever it is that was too scary for us to do. Whatever it is that we decided the risks were too big, we couldn't take the risks. But when we feel like the risk of trying, the risk of putting ourselves out there, the risk of not holding back, when we feel like that risk is too big, it's because we're focused on it, right? We've got this microscope on one single part of the spectrum and it feels huge. It feels like that's all there is. When really, if we step back and we take a look at it in a panoramic fashion, we realize, yeah, there's risks all around. It's all scary. But which one is worth listening to? Which one is worse? Would you rather risk trying, maybe failing, or would you rather risk not trying and certainly never succeeding? I love that quote. That's like, when you try, you risk failure, but when you don't try, you guarantee it, or something like that. Because you can only have the thing that you want to build, create, enjoy, experience, whatever. You can only have that if you put yourself out there and in the position to have it, you cannot have it if you don't. You cannot. It's not possible. You have to do the thing in order to have the thing. You have to make the effort. You have to try to create it. You have to try to build it. You have to put yourself out there and risk all of those things in order to even have the chance of that experience, in order to even have the chance of enjoying that or experiencing it or being that person or having that thing. And if you don't ever risk it, if you don't ever try, then it can't come to you. It can't happen. You can't experience it because you didn't do what it is you needed to do in order to have it, in order to experience it, in order to be it. So of course, I've been talking about this as far as like creating something, building something, even if we're talking about creating and building a beautiful life and, really experiencing life the way that you want to experience it. But this comes so much more potently when we're talking about becoming the person it is that we want to becoming that version of ourselves. And sure, there's risks attached to trying, to developing into that person, to becoming to that person, to stepping into being that person. Of course, there are risks. And what if you don't? What if you don't try? What if you don't grow? What if you don't? I mean, because that's certainly an option. You can try not to anyway. Because like I said, every day is different and every day is going to bring you something, and you can create more of what the world, more of what comes to you, and do that, draw it in more intentionally, or you can just kind of stand there and see what happens, because something's going to happen. You might as well do it intentionally. You might as well do it intentionally, because then you actually have a little bit more control. I'm not saying a lot of control. I'm saying a little bit more control, because you're like, oh yeah, well, I did this and then there was that result, and either I liked it or that was crappy and now I'm going to do something else. So there's that. But the risk of staying the same, of not trying, of not creating the thing, of not creating the life, of not building the thing, of not trying to have that experience, the risk is going to be more of the same. And maybe not even more of the same. Maybe there will be some decline there. Maybe it'll be like, well, why are things just getting worse? Because you're not doing anything about it. And the interesting thing about having a house, like especially with kids, where it's like you clean the house, but if you stop, it doesn't just stay. And if you stop, it doesn't get any better. It just gets worse. If you don't do anything about the mess, it just gets worse. And even if you lived alone, right? Like even if you lived alone and there was nobody else to mess it up, right? Like dust will settle. Dust, there are things that you wouldn't touch, that you wouldn't, that dust will settle. And, there will be things that the grass will grow, the leaves will fall. If you don't maintain it, it will get worse. Anyways, that was kind of a side tangent. What I'm saying is, when you've got this something holding you back, it's probably the risk. It's probably the fear. It's probably the risk of whatever situation, circumstance, fear, and it feels big and it feels looming and it feels large. Just remember, you've got one side of it under a microscope, and that's why it feels so big. And if you step back and you take it all in, you'll realize that's just one story. And is that the worst one? Or is the worst one doing nothing? Is the worst one staying the same? Is the worst one not trying? Which will you regret more? Trying and have it not work out, or not trying and knowing that it will never work out because you are never doing the thing? And that's the last question. So just to end this episode where we started it, your introspective question for today is, where are you holding back? And if you want to go into the why, Go into the why and why. Get specific. Why are you holding back on this thing? Why are you holding back on creating this, building this, living this, experiencing this, whatever it is for you? Why are you holding back? But more importantly, notice where you're holding back. Where in your life are you holding back? Because that was the original question. Where in your life are you holding back? And why? Thank you for joining me on this episode. Join me again next Friday for our 200th episode. It's going to be so exciting. I am so excited. Really, the best, the best, the best. So please join me next Friday. Join me on YouTube if you can, because it'll be that good. Thank you for joining me. I totally love you. Bye for now.